What if the most dangerous man in the Testaments isn't a commander, but a doctor hiding in plain sight? Because Episode 8 quietly confirmed something terrifying. Dr. Grove has been abusing girls inside Gilead for a long time. And, even worse, the system already knows. But now, for the first time, someone powerful has finally taken notice. Aunt Lydia. And if there's one thing we know about Lydia, it's this. She does not forget. She does not forgive. And when she decides someone has become a threat to her order inside Gilead, their downfall is only a matter of time. So today, we're breaking down exactly how Dr. Grove could be exposed, how Aunt Lydia may secretly destroy him from within the system, and why his downfall could become one of the most important turning points in the entire season. Because honestly, I don't think Lydia plans to simply punish Dr. Grove. I think she plans to make an example out of him. Let's break it all down. Episode 8 gave us one of the darkest reveals of the season when Agnes discovered that Hulda had also been abused by Dr. Grove. And suddenly, Agnes realizes something horrifying. What happened to her wasn't isolated. This wasn't one terrible mistake. This is a pattern. Dr. Grove has likely been exploiting vulnerable girls for years under the protection of Gilead's system. And the scariest part? He's perfectly positioned to do it. Because he's a doctor. He has authority, privacy,
Trust.
access. In Gilead, those things make someone incredibly dangerous, especially when young girls are taught never to question powerful men. But what makes this storyline so interesting is Aunt Lydia's response. Because Lydia doesn't panic. She doesn't publicly explode. She doesn't immediately drag Grove into the street. Instead, she quietly tells Agnes,
He will be dealt with.
and honestly, that line might be one of the most threatening things Lydia has ever said. Because Lydia understands something important. In Gilead, public justice and real justice are not the same thing. And that's exactly why I think Lydia is about to destroy Dr. Grove using the system itself against him. This is the first thing we need to understand. Aunt Lydia is not motivated purely by emotion. She's strategic, calculated, patient, and, most importantly, she protects the stability of Gilead above everything else. Now, that doesn't make her good. Far from it. But it does mean she understands that Dr. Grove represents a serious threat. Because if multiple girls begin talking, if whispers begin spreading, if families lose trust in the marriage system, then the entire structure Lydia helps maintain starts cracking apart. And Lydia cannot allow that. So rather than exposing Grove emotionally, I think Lydia will expose him politically. That's much more dangerous. Because in Gilead, political destruction is often worse than death. One of Lydia's greatest strengths is information. She watches people carefully. She notices patterns. And she knows how to weaponize secrets. That's why I don't think Agnes was the first complaint Lydia has heard about Grove. I think Agnes simply confirmed what Lydia already suspected. Remember, Hulda immediately folded under pressure and called the abuse a misunderstanding. That tells us the system has likely silenced victims before, which means Lydia probably knows the signs already. The fear, the behavior changes, the emotional withdrawal. She's seen it before. And now that Agnes has come forward too, Lydia finally has confirmation that Grove's behavior is systemic. So the first strategy will likely involve quiet surveillance. Not official investigations. Secret ones. Lydia could begin monitoring Grove's appointments, questioning aunts discreetly, or tracking which girls leave his office distressed. And the scary part? Grove probably won't even realize he's being watched. Because the biggest mistake corrupt men make in Gilead is believing the system protects them forever. Now here's where things get really interesting. Lydia rarely acts alone. She understands influence. And she knows how to manipulate other aunts into carrying out her will. So, I think one possible strategy is that Lydia slowly builds quiet support against Grove inside Ardua Hall itself.
Why?
Because if Lydia acts completely alone, she risks political backlash. Dr. Grove is still a respected doctor. He likely has connections to powerful commanders and influential families. But if multiple aunts begin raising concerns simultaneously, that becomes harder to suppress. Especially because fertility and marriage are central to Gilead's survival. Any threat to young brides becomes a threat to the future of the regime itself. And Lydia is smart enough to frame the situation exactly that way. Not as abuse, but as instability. That's how she wins. This theory feels especially likely because Grove's position gives him access to girls before marriage, meaning he probably has records, schedules, examinations, possibly even patterns linking him to multiple victims. And Lydia? She values paperwork almost as much as power. I would not be surprised if Lydia secretly begins tracing connections between Grove's appointments and sudden emotional changes in girls under his care, especially girls who later became withdrawn, fearful, or difficult during engagements. And honestly, the horrifying part is that Gilead probably ignored these signs for years because protecting male authority mattered more than protecting girls. But I think Lydia's real weapon against Dr. Grove won't be evidence. It'll be fear. This is where Dr. Grove becomes truly vulnerable. Because in Gilead, young girls are treated almost like political assets. Future wives, future mothers, future symbols of purity. If commanders begin suspecting that Grove has tainted girls before marriage, they may see him as contaminating the very thing Gilead values most. And once powerful men begin feeling personally threatened, everything changes. Especially if one of those girls belongs to an elite family, which Agnes absolutely does. That's critical, because Agnes is not politically insignificant. Her family connections give Lydia leverage, and Lydia knows how to use leverage better than almost anyone. Imagine Lydia quietly informing certain commanders that Grove's behavior risks scandal, risks distrust, risks embarrassing powerful families. Suddenly, this stops being about morality. It becomes about politics. And that's exactly the kind of battlefield Lydia dominates. Now, this theory feels extremely possible. Gilead survives by pretending to be morally pure. That image matters. So when corruption becomes impossible to hide, the regime often sacrifices individuals to preserve the illusion of righteousness. And Dr. Grove may become the perfect scapegoat, not because Gilead suddenly cares about victims, but because removing him allows the system to pretend it corrected itself. That's important. Authoritarian systems rarely admit structural failure. Instead, they blame bad individuals. Which means Grove could eventually be exposed publicly, not as evidence of systemic abuse, but as a rare deviant who betrayed Gilead's values. And Lydia would absolutely support that narrative if it helps preserve her influence. But here's the twist. I don't think Lydia's reasons for taking down Grove are entirely noble. This is where the storyline becomes emotionally fascinating. Because despite Lydia's cruelty, there are moments where she seems genuinely disturbed by what's happening to these girls, especially Agnes. And I think part of that comes from recognition. Lydia understands vulnerability. She understands powerlessness. And deep down, she knows Gilead devours young women emotionally. That's why Agnes coming to her matters so much. Agnes trusted her, and Lydia values loyalty deeply. So Grove didn't just hurt girls. He disrupted Lydia's carefully controlled system. He forced girls into fear and instability before marriage. And Lydia may view that as an unforgivable violation of her order. Now, let's talk about Agnes specifically, because I think her role in Grove's downfall is going to become much bigger. Up until now, Agnes has mostly been passive, reactive,
Quiet.
but episode 8 changed something in her. For the first time, she actively challenged the system by speaking to Lydia. That's huge. And once someone takes that first step, it becomes easier to take another. And another. I think Agnes may eventually realize that silence protects Grove more than anyone else, especially after seeing Hulda retreat into fear. That guilt could push Agnes into becoming more vocal, more rebellious, more dangerous. And honestly, that would fit perfectly with the season's larger themes. Because rebellion in the Testaments doesn't always begin with violence. Sometimes it begins with someone finally refusing to stay quiet. And if Agnes becomes more outspoken, Dr. Grove may not be the only man who starts panicking. Now this is where things could become terrifying. Because if Grove realizes Lydia is investigating him, or suspects Agnes spoke up, he may become desperate. And desperate people inside Gilead are dangerous, especially powerful men. There's a real possibility Grove could attempt to discredit Agnes or Hulda before accusations spread further. Remember, Gilead already tends to distrust women emotionally. So Grove could frame the girls as unstable, confused, or rebellious.
And sadly,
Parts of the system would probably believe him. That's what makes Lydia's involvement so important. Without her protection, the girls would likely be crushed by the system. Here's the theory I keep coming back to. I don't think this storyline is only about one doctor. I think it's about exposing cracks inside Gilead itself. Because once girls begin realizing they're not alone, once victims recognize patterns, once silence starts breaking, control becomes harder to maintain. That's dangerous for Gilead. Very dangerous. Especially because characters like Daisy are already questioning the system from the outside, while Agnes is beginning to question it from within. Dr. Grove's downfall could become the moment those emotional cracks start widening permanently. By the end of episode 8, Aunt Lydia made one thing very clear. Dr. Grove's time is running out. But the most interesting part isn't whether he'll fall. It's how. Because Lydia doesn't destroy people impulsively. She dismantles them carefully, strategically, quietly, and honestly, that makes her far more terrifying than the commanders. Dr. Grove thought his position protected him. He thought fear would keep girls silent. He thought Gilead would always shield powerful men. But he may have forgotten the most dangerous truth in this entire system. Aunt Lydia protects Gilead first. And once she decides someone has become a threat to her order, their fate is usually sealed. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more of the Testament's theories, recaps, and deep dives. Because as the season moves closer to its finale, the cracks inside Gilead are only getting bigger.